I'm ready. One of us is ready.
I'm nearly ready. I'm ready. Okay. Coming up, I journey to Rome in search of a chief media officer. Hello and welcome to IDCom's Media Snack, episode 77. So, what we decided was we are approaching the 1-year anniversary of the ANA's Media Transparency Report, which was published on the 7th of June in 2016. So for the next kind of 6-7 episodes, we're going to look at some areas where we think there's been significant change in the media industry globally, perhaps as a response to that, as we build up to the anniversary of that report.
And the focus of our first episode is going to be transparency.
Yeah, indeed. And that actually was a key focus from a session that I was involved in at the Festival of Media this week, so we'll share a bit about that.
Yeah, and it's going to be a key consideration in light of the Vivendi-Havas merger.
Indeed, which was announced this week. So all coming up on today's Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a sandwich. Okay. So we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the ANA's famous or infamous media transparency guidelines, published on the 7th of June last year. And building up to that, I think it's a really good opportunity. We said at the time that we thought it was going to ignite the change that the industry needed. And I think we've been somewhat correct in that, because it's driven a lot of change, maybe not enough in some places. So in the coming weeks, we're going to look into some key areas where we think there's been significant change in the year since the report came out.
That's right. And I think one thing that is undeniable is that the area of transparency has been where the greatest focus has been, right? And relationships between brands and advertisers have had to be far more transparent moving forward. And that was a discussion that you had with Gerry, right?
Yes.
Gerry D'Angelo.
So this week was the Festival of Media in Rome, and I had the pleasure of doing a Q&A with Gerry D'Angelo, who is the new global head of media for P&G. We did an episode just about Gerry a little while back. We called him the $7 billion man. I don't think he's that comfortable being called that anymore, because he's acknowledges that he's one component of a big now media operation internally, and obviously really interesting time to talk to Gerry.
Yeah, and it was also, sorry to interrupt you, it was also kind of unique in that this was his first and only public speaking appearance. Right?
Exactly. So he joined P&G in January. This I think will be his only public kind of big stage appearance of the year. So really interesting, and a really interesting opportunity to dig into, obviously, this amazing gift that he's been given by one of his senior stakeholders, Marc Pritchard, the chief brand officer, which is a very clear action plan for media. So the industry, of course, is now looking to Gerry as their expectation is that he's the person that's going to lead that transformation or implement that action plan. So that was why this session was obviously got a lot of interest, because it was the first time that somebody other than Marc had been speaking about the action plan.
So for those of us that weren't in the audience and didn't have the privilege of seeing the two of you chat on stage, what was the kind of key theme of his of his delivery? Yeah,
well, the session we'd called Media Transparency, but it was put into context of some of the things that Marc had said, which was about really the ambition of just achieving better advertising. So the whole, if you've heard us talk a lot about it, and we'll link again, if you haven't seen Marc's speeches, have a look, because the continuing message that he's been reinforcing, and Gerry did the same, is we want and we aspire to do better advertising, right? We want to find the craft of better advertising, and we want to remove the crap of bad advertising. And what Gerry did this week was reinforce this idea that we are wasting time and money on a non-transparent media supply chain, and that we should be using those resources, the time and the money that we're wasting, on creating better advertising experiences to grow our brands and raise our reputation with customers. That's the hypothesis of it. So media transparency is not an end unto itself, but it's it's a desire to get to better standards of advertising across the business.
And did you get the impression that under Gerry's guardianship, they're activating and implementing a lot of the themes that
exactly right. So if you remember, there were five parts of the action points, which we won't go through again, but we'll link to those again. So what Gerry, because I asked him this exact question, it's like, are you actually really doing this? Like, he's 4 months into the job. It's just also 4 months since Marc laid out the action plan. Are you doing this? And he said, yeah, they are activating all parts of the action plan at the same time. So they're not going through like a checklist. They are implementing it entirely. But it's more than a job for just Marc or just Gerry or even just the media team. He made a point of stating how this is a cross-functional, or requires cross-functional participation within P&G. And Marc in the past had talked about setting up these task force, and that's what Gerry was reiterating. And it covers all parts of the business, not just marketing, but procurement and legal and lots of other different parts of the business. I've got now an insight and coming together to implement these 5 steps of the action plan.
And did he give an indication as to how long this kind of roadmap is going to take?
No, I don't think so. I think he didn't mention it this week. I think Marc suggested that 2017 is when they want to implement this stuff.
Right.
Some of it is easier than others. The thing that's perhaps trickier is the agency contracts, making sure they're fully transparent. Tackling ad fraud is a nice, big, bold ambition, but that requires, obviously, there's lots and lots of complexity in that. So I think it's going to take a bit of time. I think Gerry's going to find he's got a lot to do in the next few years.
And I mean, was he intimidated, do you think, by the magnitude of the job in hand? Or I mean, how is he kind of reacting? It's a big gig, right?
Yeah.
And it's a big challenge that he's being given. Yeah. And the global marketing community and media community is going to be watching.
No, exactly. And I think he appreciates the enormity of that. Firstly, the spotlight, but also the responsibility. And we've known Gerry for a long time. You could say it's he has obviously lots and lots of depth of expertise in media and lots of knowledge, but it requires the right kind of person, really, because in that role, you've got to be very pragmatic, you've got to be very assured, and you've got to be very kind of rational to reassure a sometimes jittery marketplace, right, who weren't quite sure how P&G would actually enact lots of Marc's kind of vision. Now there's some reassurance. You've got somebody of kind of like Gerry's caliber and also of his temperament to start rolling this out. I think it was a good moment, I think, for the industry to see this is the guy and the team that's going to implement this action plan.
Do you know, I mean, what I like particularly about it is that it's actually a beautiful blueprint for how a chief marketing officer and a chief media officer can kind of complement each other, right? So you've got Marc Pritchard, who is accountable for marketing performance and spotted an issue and had a clear vision and perspective on how to address that. And then essentially he's handed over the baton to somebody within his organisation that has the mandate and the expertise and the capabilities to make those changes happen. So, when there was a lot of discussion around the role of the chief media officer and how that perhaps would complement or conflict with the chief marketing officer, this is actually the perfect example of how both can work really well together for the benefit of that organisation's kind of media delivery.
And that was, I think that was a key moment. It wasn't something which explicitly we talked about, because it's more than obviously just Marc and Gerry. And also I think Gerry's quite keen to point out he's not technically the chief media officer, because that was never his title. He's now global head of media, global media director. But you're exactly right. It showed for any CMOs that were sat in the audience or might kind of have been picking up on Marc's action plan, and they're wondering, how do I implement this kind of thing? What kind of people do I need? How are we going to do it? I think you can see in Gerry as a person and also in his role, like, this is the kind of complementary skill set you need as a CMO to be able to make significant transformation of media and to drive transparency agenda. So you get a really good sense of that kind of double act and partnership, I think, to address some of these issues.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. I mean, they've pioneered this kind of role. They're championing such a critical set of issues around our industry, and you know, I mean, Gerry's obviously a very good, safe pair of hands to sort of be given that responsibility.
And the one thing I should add as well that Gerry was keen to reiterate was, if you remember in Marc's speeches, there was at the end of every speech, it was a very strong call to action, which was, he used a lot of the words like saying, you know, don't just wait for us to do it, you know, get involved, this was collective responsibility to address some of the issues that he'd laid out. And you know, Gerry reiterated that. He was keen to point out that you know, as far as he's concerned, P&G are not a self-appointed leader of the industry. They're not saying, like, you know, you have to follow us. There's nothing too obliging about it. But what he did say, he used the words which I thought was a brilliant example, was, this is not a spectator sport, right? So if you have responsibility for media and then you have a fiduciary duty over that as an investment, then get off the bench and join in and play the game. We'll follow them really closely.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be incredible, I think, the impact of this action plan, and it's going to be fascinating watching Gerry now implement it.
Couldn't agree with you more. Continuing on our theme of transparency
And change. Yep.
The news this week that the merger of Vivendi, publishing company, and Havas, the marketing communications media agency, is likely to take place.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that's raised a whole host of interesting questions. The benefits that merger will bring to clients from a creative and content perspective, I think, are probably quite obvious. But it also raises the potential question of conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got a media agency and you've got a company that has media owners. Canal Plus, the most obvious one in France.
Yeah.
So why is that an issue?
Well, I mean, ideally, you don't want your media inventory, so your media owners, in the same company as the people that are supposed to be buying media on behalf of advertisers, because that's the accusation that this is a conflict of interest. But you know, this is a fact of life, really. We live and we work in an industry where, sadly, perhaps at many levels there's conflicts of interest, perhaps through lots of consolidation. This is just further consolidation, but in itself is nothing new. I don't think it's hugely different to, you know, let's just say WPP as an example, who have been making purchases of content businesses for many, many years. I mean, they own big chunks of Vice Media, of Refinery, and others. This just happens to be the other way around. It's content perhaps merging with agency. So is it a conflict? Yes, potentially, but it's just about how it gets managed now.
And that's what I think is really interesting, because going into this merger, Havas and the new group that this merger is going to create will have to be completely transparent in the way that they operate. They will have to have a complete open book policy to neutralize any possible suggestion that there is a conflict of interest. And so the principle of transparency as part of this arrangement can be without question. And I think that is the way that you know, the leadership team will have to approach it. There can be no hiding place. There can be no question mark over you know, any transparent issues within this. And if they get this right, then I think it can really benefit clients.
That's the opportunity, isn't it? And if we ladder this all the way back to where we started today, you know, would Vivendi and Havas be required to be as transparent about that if it were not for the ANA report of 12 months ago? So if that had not happened, you know, would this maybe just cause a kind of stink, but we all then move on? I think no, I don't think that would have happened. I think it's different now. You know, I think the ANA, you know, Marc Pritchard and now Gerry and others we've now created a change in the industry where you know, a merger of Vivendi and Havas is going to be not only subject to greater scrutiny, but also gives the opportunity for them to redefine the operating model. So, you know, we would be unsurprised should this group really make a very big play for transparency, if some way to overcome any criticism.
And they have to do that straight away.
Yeah.
So, you know, there would be no benefit in this being a gradual process. The transparency and by which that they will operate their clients' money in this new organisation has to be upfront and foremost in every conversation that they have.
Yeah, yeah. And the other interesting part of that deal is, you know, some of the analyst community have been suggesting, and which I think we agree with, is that this could give Havas Group with Vivendi together the scale and the momentum and the strategy to maybe bid for the IPG group. They would be relatively complementary, at least geographically. So we might see that actually this consolidation triggers further consolidation, and we end up with a big five agencies in a year's time. But we'll see. It's another big bet.
There's a prediction.
Here we go. So on that bombshell, that's all for this week. You know, let's get excited about greater transparency. We're going to keep looking in the rundown to the A&A report over the next few weeks. Leave comments below, but thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.
Have a good weekend.
Oh,
I thought that was it.